me police! Show up police!
Gentlemen, do you have a warrant?
Hello everybody, and welcome once again to today's video here on the Junkyard News. And in today's video news story, we are going to discuss a case in which an attorney just received the settlement of $760,000 paid by the city's insurance, and the public was assured that no taxpayer money would end up going towards this settlement. But the brunt of the case and the discussion we're going to have today is when police misuse the community caretaker exemption to the Fourth Amendment to try to get around a search warrant. It not only erodes the public trust, but the constitutional protections safeguarded in our Bill of Rights. This video is about Stephanie Rafkin, a 64-year-old attorney from Shorewood, Wisconsin, who found herself at the center of national attention after a dramatic confrontation with law enforcement. See, the ordeal began during the heated Black Lives Matter protests back in June of 2020, sparked by the killing of George Floyd. Rafkin, upset by the gathering outside her home, confronted a group of protesters, which included a 17-year-old organizer. A tense moment escalated into a physical conflict when she pushed the teenager, all caught on cell phone video. The incident captured on the video quickly went viral, drawing widespread condemnation. What followed, however, was just as controversial. You see, police arrived at Rafkin's home the next day to arrest her for assault. But she refused to cooperate, locking herself inside her home, knowing that the police would need a search warrant to enter her home. Police stood outside her home for nearly 30 minutes, knocking on the door, walking around the property, trying to get her to come to the door, and on body camera you actually hear an officer says, when she comes out, we're going to arrest her. No question.
To arrest her.
If she comes out, arrest her.
With no mention of obtaining a warrant.
She comes out, we're going to cuff her and stuff her. But she didn't come out. She ignored the police attempt to get her to the door and open the door. But after 30 minutes, a neighbor came up to the officers and tried to explain, you know what? It's possible she's sleeping. She told me on the phone a while ago that she's been having trouble sleeping and she took a sleeping pill about 12 hours ago. And that right there led the police to concoct a scenario to try to get around a warrant to enter the premises. You would think in that 30 minutes that they would have time to call a judge and get a warrant to enter the premise to effect the arrest, knowing that she was, in fact, inside. But instead of jumping through that legal loop, they decided, hey, we need to make sure she hasn't overdosed on sleeping pills. We're going to enact the community caretaker law, the exception to the Fourth Amendment, to bust in her door and make sure she's still alive. Stephanie, of course, was alive as she came downstairs and asked the officers, do you have a warrant to be in my home? To which the officer says, oh, we're acting as community caretakers. And she said, well, as you can see, I'm alive, I'm fine. You can leave my house now.
Gentlemen, do you have a warrant?
We're here for a community caretaker, okay?
Community caretaker, I'm perfectly fine. I am sleeping.
Where she was arrested in her dining room.
Turn around for her. Put your money back. Thank you.
You're going to arrest me in my own home?
Don't.
No.
Don't start.
Don't.
Got it. Yep, I got arrested.
But since they were already inside, using the community caretaker exception to the Fourth Amendment, they then placed her under arrest, and that is at the crux of her lawsuit. Now, this case raised eyebrows, not only for Rafkin's actions from the previous timeline, when she spit on a protester who was 17, which started all this, but for the heavy-handed tactics used by law enforcement to effect an arrest. Critics questioned whether the community caretaker justification was misapplied, as there was no apparent immediate danger. The incident became a flashpoint in debates about race, policing, and civil liberties, leaving behind a complicated legacy of mistrust and legal challenges. You see, police circumventing the Fourth Amendment by misusing the community caretaker exception to enter a home under false pretenses is blatantly wrong, because of course it undermines fundamental constitutional protections. The Fourth Amendment protects individuals against unreasonable searches and seizures, requiring law enforcement to obtain a warrant supported by probable cause before entering a private residence. Exceptions, such as community caretaker doctrine, are narrowly defined and intended only for situations where police must act to protect public safety or prevent imminent harm, such as welfare checks or emergencies unrelated to criminal investigations. And that's the key, unrelated to criminal investigations. When police try to circumvent the Fourth Amendment by abusing the community caretaker exception, police sidestep the safeguards that require judicial oversight. The warrant process exists to prevent arbitrary and unjustified intrusions into private homes, ensuring law enforcement actions are based on valid legal grounds rather than subjective judgments or convenience. Because we all know, even though the public trust is at an all-time low, when police misuse exceptions, it diminishes trust even more in law enforcement. Communities rely on assurances that officers will act lawfully and respect constitutional limits.
Stupid or something.
Violations create fear that rights can be disregarded at any time, especially in contentious or politically charged situations. Courts have repeatedly emphasized that the community caretaker doctrine is not a catch-all excuse to bypass the Fourth Amendment, as in Caniglia v. Storm back in 2021, where the U.S. Supreme Court clarified that the doctrine does not allow warrantless home entry outside genuine emergencies. Misapplication of this rule directly contradicts established legal standards to enter a home without a warrant. And if we allow law enforcement to stretch the definition of the community caretaker doctrine, it creates a dangerous precedent. If officers can justify forced entry for questionable reasons, it opens up the door to more frequent abuses, eroding civil liberties even more and weakening the rule of law. And in the case of Stephanie Rapkin, there was no evidence or immediate danger to herself, others, or public safety that would justify invoking the community caretaker exception and using it not only to break down her door, but arrest her and use it as a pretext for a criminal arrest, as that misrepresents its purpose and contravenes constitutional protections. And let me finalize by saying misusing legal exceptions to justify warrantless entry is an affront to the principles of justice and due process. The Fourth Amendment is a cornerstone of American freedom, especially in one's home, and circumventing it under false pretenses betrays both the letter of the law as well as the spirit of the law. Thank you again for tuning in to this video by the Junkyard News. Be careful, people. I'm telling you, for the next video we cover on here, the next news story, we're going to be talking about you in the next one. Thanks again.
Stephanie Rapkin. She spit on a Black Lives Matter protester in the summer of 2020 and was eventually convicted of disorderly conduct.
But the incident that resulted in this massive payment to Rapkin stems from what happened the next day at her home.
Stephanie Rapkin on June 7th, 2020.
What's going on? 336, Met 23. Is that number?
We witnessed some of that on video.
Okay.
She came out, she was friends with Jade, she pushed him.
Officers respond to an assault complaint from a small group of protesters gathered outside.
You people are so incredibly stupid, it isn't funny.
You spit on a 17-year-old kid.
This man tells officers Rapkin came out of her home and shoved him. She then went inside her home and locked the door.
What happens if she doesn't come out?
We're working on that. Stephanie, it's the police. Please come to the door.
Officers pounded on her door for about 30 minutes, making it clear to each other they were here to arrest her.
If she comes out, arrest her.
With no mention of obtaining a warrant.
She called me about 20 minutes ago.
A neighbor then tells one officer that Rapkin took a sleeping pill 12 hours earlier.
I know she took a dose this morning, and then probably another couple of doses because she couldn't get to sleep. So she's taking multiple doses of sleeping medication? I don't know. She might.
Police decide they're going to break into the locked home to do a welfare check.
Nice. Nice.
And several officers
Stephanie, police!
enter with service weapons drawn. Body camera video shows Rapkin walk down the stairs.
Gentlemen, do you have a warrant?
We're here for a community caretaker, okay?
Community caretaker, I'm perfectly fine. I am sleeping.
Where she was arrested in her dining room.
Turn around for her. Put your hands behind your back. Thank you.
Rapkin was escorted out of her home.
Oh, great, you broke open my door.
No, but you weren't answering us.
To an applause from protesters outside as she's put in the patrol vehicle. After the arrest, Rapkin, an attorney herself, hired lawyers to file a federal civil rights lawsuit. Her attorney, James Odell, says the case is all about a violation of the Fourth Amendment, which protects people from unreasonable searches and seizures by the government.
I think that if you watch the videotape, I think that reasonable minds could conclude from that the police officers here had a really easy route to avoid trouble, which is just call a judge.
Odell says if police were truly there to enter the home for a welfare check, they should have left the home after realizing she was safe.
You're not allowed to stick around and then hope that you get the opportunity to do police activity when you were really supposed to be there just to make sure everyone was safe.
Shorewood's response to the complaint denied any wrongdoing, and the village manager told me residents don't have to pay for the $760,000 settlement because it was covered by insurance. Odell says the lawsuit could have been avoided altogether if police had gotten a warrant.
The law is very simple. You should get a warrant unless there's very specific circumstances. And what that means is that there has to be an emergency, and the emergency has to be so pressing that you just don't have time to talk to the judge to get the approval. But, you know, our claim here is that if you have enough time to sit around and debate, you know, what you're going to do, you have enough time to pick up the phone and call a judge.
Shorewood's police chief tells me none of the officers involved in this incident were suspended or disciplined for their actions.